Let me ask you a simple question. What if the life you want is not waiting for you to become a different person, but waiting for you to see your life differently? Because most of us think change begins with our circumstances. We say, when I get the opportunity, I'll change. Seva, when I have more money, I'll be happier. When people start believing in me, I'll start believing in myself. But what if we have it backwards? What if the first thing that needs to change is not your job, your relationships, your situation, or your circumstances? Sasai, what if it's the way you think about them? You see, two people can face the exact same problem, and one sees a dead end, while the other sees a doorway. The situation is the same. The difference is the mindset, sex, and that is why today is not really about changing your life. It is about something much more powerful, changing the way you see your life. Because when you change the way you think, you change the decisions you make. When you change your decisions, you change your actions. When you change your actions, you change your habits. And eventually, you change your life. So today, I want you to forget for a moment about what you cannot control. Forget about what happened yesterday. And ask yourself one question. The steps. What could become possible in my life if I changed the way I looked at it? Because sometimes the breakthrough you have been waiting for isn't outside of you. Sometimes it begins with a new way of thinking. Think about this for a moment. Two people can stand in the exact same situation, face the exact same problem, experience the exact same setback, and yet walk away with completely different experiences. One person sees failure, the other sees feedback, one sees rejection, the other sees redirection, one sees a closed door, the other starts looking for another way in. The circumstances are the same. The facts are the same. The difficulty is the same. So what creates the difference? The way they think about what is happening, that is the power of mindset. Your mindset is the lens through which you interpret your life. It influences what you notice, what you believe, what you expect, and ultimately what you do. And because your actions shape your results, the way you think has a much greater impact on your life than you may realize. We often believe that our reality creates our thoughts. Something goes wrong, so we become negative. Someone criticizes us, so we lose confidence. We experience failure, so we start believing that we are not capable. We face difficulty, so we tell ourselves that life is against us. But there is another way to look at it. Your circumstances may influence your thoughts, but your thoughts influence how you respond to those circumstances. And your response matters. You cannot always choose what happens to you. You cannot control every person you meet, every opportunity you receive, every rejection you experience, or every unexpected problem that enters your life. But you can influence the meaning you give to those experiences. Imagine losing an opportunity. One person says, "This proves I am not good enough." Another says, "This shows me where I need to improve." The same event. Different interpretation, different emotion, different action, a different future. That is why your mindset can become more powerful than your circumstances. If you constantly tell yourself, "I can't," your brain begins searching for evidence that supports that belief. You notice every reason why something is impossible. You focus on the risks. You remember previous failures. You compare yourself with people who seem ahead of you. Eventually, you don't even need someone else to stop you. You stop yourself. But change the question. Instead of asking, "Why can't I do this?" ask, "How could I do this?" Instead of saying, "I'm not capable," ask, "What do I need to learn?" Instead of saying, "This is too difficult," ask, "What is this difficulty trying to teach me?" The problem may not disappear, but your relationship with the problem changes. And when your relationship with a problem changes, your behavior changes. This is where real transformation begins. A strong mindset does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It does not mean ignoring pain, disappointment, fear, or uncertainty. It means refusing to allow those things to become the definition of who you are. You can acknowledge that something is difficult without deciding that it is impossible. You can admit that you are afraid without allowing fear to make every decision for you. You can experience failure without turning failure into your identity. There is a huge difference between saying, "I failed," and saying, "I am a failure." The first describes an experience. The second creates an identity. And the identity you create for yourself can influence the life you build. If you believe you are someone who gives up when things become difficult, you will look for reasons to quit. If you believe you are someone who learns from difficulty, you will look for lessons. If you believe you are someone who cannot change, you will protect your old habits. If you believe you are capable of growth, you will become more willing to challenge yourself. Your beliefs create expectations. Your expectations influence your choices. Your choices create patterns, and those patterns gradually become your life. This is why you need to become careful about the conversations you have with yourself. Because the voice you hear most often is your own. Every day, you are telling yourself a story. You are telling yourself what you can do, what you cannot do, what you deserve, what you don't deserve, who you are not, and what is possible for you. Sometimes that story was written by your past. Maybe someone told you that you were not smart enough. Maybe someone made you feel that your dreams were unrealistic. Maybe you tried something once and failed. Maybe you were rejected. Maybe you made a mistake that you still carry with you. But your past may explain some of your beliefs. It does not have to control them. You are allowed to question the beliefs you have carried for years. You are allowed to say, maybe I was wrong about myself. You are allowed to become a beginner again. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to grow. And you are allowed to change your mind. Sometimes the greatest limitation in your life is not a lack of talent, money, education, or opportunity. Sometimes it is the belief that you have already reached the limit of what is possible. Look at the person who says, people like me don't succeed. That person will interpret every challenge as evidence. But imagine replacing that sentence with, I haven't figured it out yet. Those two statements create completely different possibilities. I can't closes the conversation. I can't yet keeps the conversation open. And that small word, yet, can change the way you approach your entire life. Because growth begins when you stop treating your current abilities as your permanent abilities. You may not be confident today. You may not be disciplined today. You may not have the skills today. You may not have the opportunity today. But today is not the final version of you. The person you are right now is a starting point, not a sentence. Your mindset determines whether you see that starting point as a limitation or as an opportunity to grow. And this is why changing your mindset does not mean simply thinking positive thoughts. It means learning to think more intentionally. It means asking better questions. It means challenging assumptions. It means looking at setbacks differently. It means replacing automatic reactions with conscious responses. When something goes wrong, instead of immediately asking, why is this happening to me? You can ask, what can I learn from this? When someone succeeds, instead of asking, why am I not there? You can ask, what can I learn from what they did? When you face uncertainty, instead of saying, what if everything goes wrong? You can ask, what if I discover that I am capable of more than I thought? The questions you ask determine where your attention goes. And where your attention goes, your energy follows. If you constantly focus on everything that is wrong, you will feel powerless. If you begin looking for what you can influence, you begin to find possibilities. You don't need to control everything. You need to control what belongs to you, your attitude, your effort, your choices, your response, your willingness to learn, your willingness to keep going. Your mindset does not guarantee that life will become easy. It gives you a different way to face what life brings. And sometimes, that is the difference between someone who remains stuck in the same place and someone who continues moving forward despite the circumstances. Most people spend their lives waiting for their circumstances to change before they decide to change themselves. They say, when I get a better job, then I'll be happy. When I have more money, then I'll feel secure. When people start respecting me, then I'll believe in myself. When I have the right opportunity, then I'll take action. And without realizing it, they make their growth dependent on something they do not control. But what if the order is wrong? What if you don't have to wait for your circumstances to change before you begin changing your life? What if the first thing that needs to change is not what is happening around you, but what is happening inside you? Because your circumstances are only one part of the equation. Your thinking determines how you respond to those circumstances. You can be in a difficult situation and still choose courage. You can experience rejection and still choose to keep going. You can have very little and still choose gratitude. You can face uncertainty and still choose to move forward. You can be surrounded by people who doubt you and still decide to believe in yourself. That is where personal change begins. Not with the world changing for you, but with you changing the way you approach the world. Think about how often we blame circumstances for the way we feel. We say, my environment is holding me back. My family doesn't support me. My boss doesn't appreciate me. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have the connections. And sometimes those things are real. Life is not equally easy for everyone. Some people have advantages that others don't. Some people start with more resources, more support, more opportunities, or more confidence. But there is a dangerous point where recognizing your circumstances becomes using your circumstances as an excuse to surrender your responsibility. You may not control where you started, but you have influence over where you go next. You may not control what happened yesterday, but you can influence what you do today. You may not control how someone treated you, but you can decide what kind of person you become because of it. That distinction is powerful, because when you believe your life can only change after your circumstances change, you become a prisoner of your circumstances. You wait. You complain. You postpone. You tell yourself that someday things will be different. But someday is not a strategy. Change requires a decision. And sometimes that decision is simply deciding to see your current situation differently. Maybe you cannot leave your job today, but you can change the way you approach your work. Maybe you cannot change your financial situation overnight, but you can change the way you think about money, learning, skills, and opportunities. Maybe you cannot change a difficult relationship immediately, but you can change your boundaries, your communication, and your response. Maybe you cannot erase a painful experience from your past, but you can decide that your past will not write the rest of your story. This is why changing your thinking comes first. Because before you change your behavior, you usually have to change the belief behind that behavior. If you believe exercise is punishment, you will avoid it. If you believe exercise is an investment in yourself, you approach it differently. If you believe failure means you are incapable, you will avoid taking risks. If you believe failure is part of learning, you become more willing to try. If you believe criticism is an attack, you become defensive. If you believe criticism can reveal something you need to improve, you become curious. The event may be exactly the same. Your interpretation changes, and your interpretation changes your response. That is why two people can experience the same setback and build completely different futures from it. One person asks, "Why does this always happen to me?" Another asks, "What can I do differently next time?" One stays focused on blame. The other becomes focused on responsibility. One looks backward. The other looks forward. The difference is not necessarily intelligence. It is perspective. And perspective can be changed. You can train yourself to pause before reacting. You can train yourself to question negative assumptions. You can train yourself to look for possibilities instead of immediately looking for limitations. You can train yourself to focus on what you can control instead of spending all your energy fighting what you cannot. This does not mean becoming unrealistic. It means becoming intentional. There will be moments when your circumstances genuinely are terrible. There will be days when you lose something important. There will be people who disappoint you. There will be plans that fail. There will be doors that close. And in those moments, pretending everything is fine will not help you. But asking a better question might. What is still within my control? That question gives you somewhere to begin. Maybe you can control your next decision. Maybe you can control whether you learn from the experience. Maybe you can control whether you ask for help. Maybe you can control whether you try again. Maybe you can control whether you allow one bad chapter to convince you that the entire book is finished. Your circumstances may create the challenge. Your mindset determines how you enter the challenge. And this is why some of the strongest people are not necessarily people who have had the easiest lives. They are people who learned how to find meaning inside difficult experiences. They learned that adversity can teach. They learned that rejection can redirect. They learned that failure can reveal weaknesses that need attention. They learned that discomfort can be evidence of growth. They stopped asking life to become easier and started asking themselves to become stronger. That shift changes everything. Because when you change your thinking, you begin noticing opportunities you previously ignored. You begin seeing lessons inside mistakes. You begin seeing possibilities where you once saw limitations. You begin realizing that you may have more influence over your life than you thought. And once you realize that, you stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop waiting for everyone to believe in you. You start with what you have. You start where you are. You take one step, then another. And slowly your circumstances begin to respond to the person you are becoming. Not because the world suddenly became fair, not because every problem disappeared, but because you became different in the way you faced those problems. Your thinking changed, your choices changed, your actions changed. And when those things change consistently, your life begins to move in a different direction. Every person who wants to achieve something meaningful will eventually face an obstacle. There will be a moment when the plan doesn't work. There will be a moment when someone says no. There will be a moment when you make a mistake. There will be a moment when the results are slower than you expected. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can look at the obstacle and say, this is stopping me. Or you can look at the same obstacle and ask, what is this teaching me? That question can completely change the way you move through life. Because an obstacle is not always a wall. Sometimes it is a teacher. Sometimes it is a test. Sometimes it is a warning that your current approach is not working. Sometimes it is an invitation to become more creative, more patient, more disciplined, or more courageous. But we often don't see it that way. We see the obstacle, and immediately we see ourselves as the victim of it. We say, why is this happening to me? Why is everyone else moving forward while I'm stuck? Why does everything have to be so difficult? And when we ask those questions repeatedly, our attention becomes focused on the problem instead of the possibility. The obstacle becomes bigger in our mind than it actually is. Fear starts speaking louder than opportunity. Doubt starts speaking louder than possibility. And eventually, we don't stop because the obstacle is impossible. We stop because we have convinced ourselves that it is. Think about someone who wants to start a business but doesn't have enough money. The first thought might be, I can't do it. But another person in the exact same position might ask, what can I start with what I already have? One person sees a lack of money. The other sees a challenge that requires creativity. The circumstances are similar. The mindset is different. And that difference can change the next decision. The person who sees only the obstacle may never begin. The person who searches for a possibility may discover a smaller way to begin. Maybe the first step is not building the entire business. Maybe it is learning a skill. Maybe it is serving one customer. Maybe it is creating something small. Maybe it is finding someone who can teach them. Maybe it is simply starting with an idea and testing it. The obstacle did not disappear. The person simply stopped allowing the obstacle to decide what was possible. This is what resilient people understand. They don't necessarily have fewer problems. They have a different relationship with problems. They don't ask for a life without obstacles. They learn how to become stronger because of them. Look at any meaningful achievement, and behind it you will usually find a series of obstacles. The athlete who becomes great has injuries, losses, exhausting training sessions, and days when motivation disappears. The entrepreneur faces rejection, uncertainty, financial pressure, and ideas that fail. The student faces difficult subjects, disappointing grades, and moments when they wonder whether they are capable. The leader faces criticism, mistakes, uncertainty, and decisions that nobody else wants to make. The difference is that they don't automatically interpret difficulty as a signal to quit. They interpret difficulty as part of the process. That doesn't mean they enjoy every difficult moment. It means they understand that discomfort and failure do not necessarily mean they are on the wrong path. Sometimes difficulty is simply the price of becoming capable of something you have never done before. Imagine walking into a gym for the first time. You pick up a weight that feels heavy. Your muscles struggle. You cannot lift what someone stronger can lift. Would you look at the weight and say, this proves I am weak, so I should never exercise again? Of course not. You understand that the resistance is part of the process. The resistance is what creates the opportunity for strength. Life can work the same way. The resistance you face can become the training ground for qualities you would never develop if everything were easy. When patience is developed when things take longer than expected. Courage is developed when you have something to fear. Discipline is developed when you don't feel motivated. Confidence is developed when you repeatedly prove to yourself that you can handle difficult things. Wisdom is developed when experience teaches you what theory never could. So when an obstacle appears, don't immediately ask how quickly you can escape it. Ask what it is demanding from you. Maybe it is demanding patience. Maybe it is demanding preparation. Maybe it is demanding that you change your strategy. Maybe it is demanding that you stop relying on someone else's approval. Maybe it is demanding that you become more disciplined. Maybe it is demanding that you finally take yourself seriously. There is always something to investigate inside difficulty. And sometimes the obstacle is not even the real obstacle. Sometimes the real obstacle is the story you tell yourself about it. You lose a job and you say, my career is over. You receive criticism and you say, nobody respects me. You fail an exam and you say, I'm not intelligent. You experience rejection and you say, nobody will ever choose me. And notice what happens. The event is one thing. The story you attach to the event is something else. The event may be painful, but the story can make the pain permanent. You can lose something without losing yourself. You can fail without becoming a failure. You can be rejected without becoming unworthy. You can make a mistake without deciding that you are incapable. Your obstacle is an event. It does not have to become your identity. And once you understand that, you begin to look at setbacks differently. Instead of saying, this is the end, you start asking, what comes next? Instead of saying, I have no options, you start asking, what options have I considered? Instead of saying, I don't know how, you start saying, what do I need to learn? That shift creates movement. And movement matters. You don't need to have the entire solution before taking the next step. You only need to identify the next useful action. If you can't solve the entire problem today, solve the part you can. If you can't change the entire situation, change your response to it. If you can't see the whole path, take the next step you can see. Progress often begins with a very small decision. The decision to try one more time, the decision to make one more phone call, the decision to learn one more skill, the decision to have one more conversation, the decision to wake up tomorrow and refuse to let yesterday determine what you believe about yourself. There comes a point in every person's life when you have to stop asking who is responsible for what happened and start asking a much more important question. What am I going to do about it? Because life will give you things you did not choose. You did not choose every circumstance you were born into. You did not choose every person who entered your life. You did not choose every disappointment. You did not choose every rejection. You did not choose every mistake someone else made that affected you. But even when you cannot choose what happens to you, there is still something you can choose. You can choose your response. And that is where responsibility begins. Taking responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. It does not mean saying that every difficult thing in your life is your fault. It means recognizing the part of your life that is within your control and refusing to give that power away. There's a difference between blame and responsibility. Blame looks backward and asks, whose fault is this? A responsibility looks forward and asks, what can I do now? A blame can keep you trapped in the past. Responsibility gives you a path forward. Imagine someone who spends years saying, my parents didn't support me. Maybe that's true. Maybe they didn't. But if you continue repeating that sentence for the rest of your life, what does it give you? An explanation, perhaps, but not necessarily a solution. A more powerful question would be, I didn't receive the support I needed. What can I do now to give myself the support I need? That question changes your position. You move from waiting to acting. You move from helplessness to possibility. You begin to understand that your life cannot always be controlled, but it can be influenced by the choices you make repeatedly. Every day, you are making choices. Some are small. What time you wake up, what you focus on to, who you listen to, whether you exercise, whether you learn, whether you keep your promises to yourself, whether you spend another hour complaining or use that hour building something. And some choices are much bigger. Whether you stay in an environment that is damaging your growth, whether you pursue a goal that matters to you, whether you forgive someone, whether you set a boundary, whether you walk away, whether you begin again, you may not notice the impact of one decision, but your life is not created by one decision. It is created by repeated decisions. A single unhealthy habit may not destroy your future. A single productive habit may not transform it overnight. But repeat those choices for months and years, and the direction of your life can change completely. This is why responsibility is so powerful. It reminds you that your future is being built through the choices you make today. Sometimes we want a better life, but we don't want to take responsibility for the behaviors that are creating our current life. We want better health without changing our habits. We want financial freedom without changing how we manage money. We want confidence without doing difficult things that would build confidence. We want success without becoming disciplined. We want meaningful relationships without learning how to communicate honestly. We want change, but we want the change to happen without requiring us to change. And life doesn't work that way. If you want a different result, eventually you have to make a different choice. You cannot keep doing the same things and expect your life to move in a completely different direction. Responsibility means becoming honest with yourself, not cruel, not judgmental, honest. Ask yourself, what am I doing that is helping me? What am I doing that is hurting me? What am I avoiding? What excuse do I keep repeating? What decision have I been postponing? What habit do I know I need to change? What conversation do I need to have? What step am I afraid to take? These questions may be uncomfortable, but discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes discomfort is a sign that you are finally being honest. And honesty creates the possibility for change. There is another important part of responsibility that people often overlook. You have to take responsibility not only for your actions, but also for the meaning you give to your experiences. Someone may criticize you. You cannot control their words, but you can decide whether you will learn from them or allow them to destroy your confidence. Someone may reject you. You cannot control their decision, but you can decide whether rejection becomes proof that you are worthless or information that helps you grow. Someone may disappoint you. You cannot control their behavior, but you can decide whether you will carry anger forever or use the experience to develop stronger boundaries. Responsibility is not about controlling other people. It is about refusing to surrender control of yourself to other people. And that is one of the most freeing ideas you can understand. You don't need everyone to change before you can change. You don't need everyone to apologize before you can move forward. You don't need everyone to believe in you before you believe in yourself. You don't need permission to become more disciplined. You don't need approval to pursue something meaningful. You can begin with the choices that are available to you right now. Maybe your first choice is to stop making excuses. Maybe it is to wake up earlier. Maybe it is to spend less time scrolling and more time learning. Maybe it is to stop comparing your life to someone else's. Maybe it is to start saving money. Maybe it is to apply for the opportunity you keep telling yourself you are not ready for. Maybe it is to finally admit that the person standing between you and the next version of your life is sometimes you. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it can also be incredibly empowering, because if everything is someone else's fault, then you have to wait for someone else to change. But if you have influence over your response, your habits, your choices, and your direction, then you have something to work with. You can start today. You can make one different decision, then another. You can make a mistake and take responsibility. You can fall short and adjust. You can fail and learn. You can lose your direction and choose a new one. You can stop asking, why isn't my life different? And start asking, what am I willing to do differently? Because responsibility is not a punishment. It is ownership. It is the moment you stop handing your future over to circumstances and start recognizing that your choices have power, your life can change in a moment, but most meaningful change happens much more quietly. It begins with a thought, a different way of looking at yourself, a different way of looking at your circumstances, a different belief about what is possible, and that small change in thinking can eventually become a different decision, a different action, a different habit, and a different life. We often imagine that changing our lives requires something dramatic. We think we need a new job, a new city, more money, better relationships, a perfect opportunity, or some major event that will suddenly transform everything. But sometimes the most important transformation does not begin outside of you. It begins with the decision to stop seeing yourself as someone who is trapped by your circumstances. Your life may not be exactly where you want it to be. Maybe you have made mistakes. Maybe you have wasted time. Maybe you have chosen the wrong people. Maybe you have taken paths that did not lead where you expected. Maybe you have tried and failed more times than you want to admit. But none of those things have to become the final definition of your life. The future is not simply a continuation of the past. It is also the result of what you decide to do next. And what you decide to do next is influenced by what you believe about yourself. If you believe that you are incapable of change, you will protect the life you already have, even when you are unhappy with it. If you believe that you can grow, you become willing to challenge your habits, question your assumptions, and step into situations that make you uncomfortable. That is why mindset matters so much. Your mindset determines what you believe is possible before you even attempt it. Think about someone standing at the beginning of a difficult goal. They see the distance between where they are and where they want to be. One person thinks, "This is too far. I will never get there." Another thinks, "It is far, but I can take one step today." The destination is the same. The difference is the belief about the journey. The first person becomes overwhelmed by the size of the goal. The second person focuses on the next action. And that is how real change happens. Not by solving your entire life in one day, by changing what you do with today. You don't need to become a completely different person tomorrow. You need to make one better decision today, then repeat it. A person who wants to become healthier doesn't need to transform their entire lifestyle in one morning. They can start with one meal, one walk, one workout, one better choice. A person who wants to become successful doesn't need to know every step of their career. They can learn one skill, make one connection, take one opportunity, begin one project. A person who wants more confidence doesn't need to suddenly become fearless. They can do one thing that scares them, then another, then another. Confidence often comes after action, not before it. This is something many people misunderstand. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel confident. They wait to feel motivated. But sometimes motivation comes after movement. Sometimes confidence comes after doing the thing you were afraid to do. Sometimes clarity comes after taking the first step. You don't always think your way into action. Sometimes you act your way into a new way of thinking. And once you start acting differently, you begin seeing yourself differently. You start building evidence. You prove to yourself that you can keep a promise. You prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort. You prove to yourself that you can learn. You prove to yourself that you can recover from failure. That evidence begins to change your identity. You stop saying, "I am trying to become disciplined." You start thinking, "I am someone who keeps commitments to myself." You stop saying, "I am trying to become confident." You start thinking, "I am someone who faces difficult things." You stop saying, "I hope my life changes." You start thinking, "I am actively changing my life." That shift is powerful because your identity influences your habits and your habits influence your future. But changing your mindset does not mean eliminating every negative thought. You will still have doubts. You will still experience fear. You will still have days when you feel unmotivated. You will still question yourself. The goal is not to never have negative thoughts. The goal is to stop allowing every thought to become a command. You can think, "I am afraid," and still move forward. You can think, "I might fail," and still try. You can think, "This is difficult," and still continue. A thought is not always a fact. A feeling is not always a prediction. Fear does not always mean stop. Sometimes fear simply means that you are standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. And unfamiliar does not automatically mean dangerous. Sometimes it means growth. This is why you have to become intentional about the beliefs you repeat to yourself. If every day you tell yourself that you are behind, you will live as though you are behind. If every day you tell yourself that you are not capable, you will hesitate when opportunities appear. If every day you tell yourself that your best days are already behind you, you will stop looking for new possibilities. But if you begin telling yourself something different, not something fake, but something useful, you create room for a different future. I can learn. I can improve. I can start again. I can make a better decision. I can handle one difficult step. I don't have to be perfect to begin. These beliefs do not magically solve your problems. They change the person facing the problems, and that person is the part you can work on every single day. You cannot control how quickly the world rewards you. You cannot control whether everyone supports you. You cannot control whether every opportunity works out. But you can control whether you keep learning. You can control whether you keep showing up. You can control whether you take responsibility. You can control whether you allow disappointment to become your identity. You can control whether you choose growth over comfort. And when you consistently make those choices, your life begins to reflect them. A changed mindset changes what you notice. A changed perspective changes what you believe. Changed beliefs change your decisions. Changed decisions change your actions. Changed actions create new habits. And new habits create a different direction for your life